Today for math, we are going to be reviewing fractions and what we've learned about partitioning wholes into smaller equal parts. And then we're going to use this knowledge to play a game called Fraction Races. So first, we're just going to review what fractions are. You do not need to write this down. This is just going to be a quick review where I'm writing and you are listening and making sure you understand the things we've already learned so far. So first, we know our word fraction and we know the word partition. We're going to start with the word partition. If you remember, partition means to cut into smaller equal pieces or parts, right? And we've been doing that so much in the last week with our learning. Remember, the really important word here is smaller and equal parts, right? The parts have to be equal in order for something to be partitioned. So if I started out with one whole rectangle, remember, right now, this is what we call a whole because it's not cut into smaller equal parts. If I started to divide it into equal parts, these two shapes are the exact same size, so they are equal. This one is the exact same shape and size as this one, so now it's no longer a whole, but we call this halves because I have two of them, right? This is two equal parts. We've also learned that I can divide something into thirds. Do you remember how you divide something into thirds? How many equal parts is that? If you said 3 or if you thought 3, you are correct. Thirds is 3 equal parts because now each of these parts is exactly the same size and I've cut my whole into smaller equal parts. Those parts are the same size. Lastly, we've also learned you can cut something into fourths. And do you remember how many equal parts this is? You said 4, you are correct. And this one's easy to remember because the name or the word 4 is actually hiding out in the word fourths. So I love that because it helps me remember. Now there are a lot of ways to do this. I'm just going to do this one for now. But that's a way to divide something into 4 equal parts. Each of these smaller parts is one part of this whole shape. And they are all equal and the same size as each other. I'm going to show you a couple more ways. There are a lot of ways we can do fourths, but I'm going to show you a couple of just different ways just to remember that there are often a lot of different ways that we can divide something into smaller equal parts, or we can partition it. So the reason we're reviewing that is because now we're going to review our word fraction. We're going to review this word fraction because they're actually related to each other. So a fraction is a number, so a fraction is a number that shows some number of equal parts of a whole. Now, you might be thinking the same thing I thought when I saw this definition. I thought, whoa, this is a lot of words. So let's break this down. So we know a fraction is a number. We know it is a number, and I'm going to show you a couple examples in just a little bit. And we talked about some last week. It's a number that shows some number of equal parts of a whole. So the equal parts of a whole sounds a lot like our definition for what partitioning is. So when I write fractions, I'll show you what it means, all of these big words. I'm going to do it actually down here where I have some more space. So let's get some fractions going here. If I just started out with a very, very simple rectangle like I did earlier and I divided it in half, we know that I have 2 equal parts now. But let's say I just wanted to talk about one of them. I wanted to talk about just one of the halves. The way I can write this is like this. I can write 1 and then a line over the number 2. If you remember from last week, we were talking about 1 part of 2 equal pieces. So here I've just selected or colored in 1 part of 2 equal pieces. And it goes for lots of other fractions. Here, if I were to do my thirds and I colored in, if I just colored in one of these thirds, that becomes 1 written over the number 3 because this is 1 part of 3 equal pieces. If we remember our definition for a fraction, it says a number that shows some number of equal parts of a whole. These 3 equal pieces are the whole because our whole is made of 3 equal pieces. Now, I'm going to do thirds again and show you something different because fractions aren't always just one out of the whole. They could be more than one. And that's why our definition said shows some number. So this could be a fraction. Do you have any idea how you could write this fraction? If you guessed that you could write 2 over 3, you are correct because now I am showing 2 parts, more than one part, of 3 equal pieces or 3 equal parts. So that is how we show fractions, and this is going to be important as we begin our fraction game to remember what fractions are. Fractions, when they're written, show one part of all the wholes, and the number of pieces, total pieces that make the whole, always goes on the bottom. So here there were 3 equal pieces we divided our whole into, but here there were only 2 equal pieces that we divided our whole into. If I had a shape like this, and I wanted to show how could you write the fraction? Take a moment and think about this, or tell someone next to you. Pause the video and see if you can figure out how you would write this fraction. Then restart it once you've thought about it. All right, what did you come up with? If you thought, well, I know 4 needs to go on the bottom because there are 1, 2, 3, 4 parts that make up my whole, you are correct. And then if you said, well, the top number has to be 2 because I'm coloring in 2 parts of 4 equal pieces, you are correct. And just to remind you to add on one more piece of this top part we call the numerator, and the bottom part we call the denominator. And we're not going to use these words a lot in 2nd grade, but you know it's going to be awesome when you talk about these words in 3rd grade. You'll already know what they mean. So that is a review of fractions. Now you're going to need to get out some materials to make your game board, because for our game, fraction races, you are actually going to have to create, the game board yourself, which is pretty cool. So right now what you need is a piece of paper. I'm using paper from my printer. It has to measure 8.5 inches by 11 inches. This is pretty standard, so ask your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa if you can get paper from the printer. If you notice, mine has some writing on the back, so I'm using scrap paper, kind of like we do in our classroom. You are also going to need a ruler and a pencil and some scissors, and you're going to need 3 different colors. You're going to need 3 different colors, and I recommend using crayon. Is going to probably be the best, or colored pencil. So once you have those out, you can pause the video to get your materials. Once you have those out, you can restart it and we'll start making our game. So the first step to creating this game is we have to divide this piece of paper into 4 long strips of paper. I don't want one big paper, I want 4 long strips of paper. And this is how we're going to do this. We're going to use our measuring skills that we practiced a couple months ago in 2nd grade. And we are going to divide this paper into different parts and then cut out the strips. And then I'll show you what to do from there. So what I need you to do is turn your paper so that you have it going long ways or vertically. And at the top of my paper here, you're going to pick one end of your paper, the shorter side. When you measure this piece should be 8.5 inches. We're going to measure along and mark off every 2 inches. So on my ruler, you see where it says the 2. Remember, I'm using inches, not centimeters. You can look for the label of inches, or you can just pick the side that's larger. My centimeters are really small here. You want inches, the larger measurement. So what I'm going to do is see where it has the 2-inch mark. I'm going to make a line right here for 2 inches. Then you have 2 options. You can count by 2s, so I know after 2 would be 4, and I can mark there. Or if you just want to measure in 2 inches, you can move your ruler down, line up the end line with your mark, and make a mark at 2. Either way, it'll be the same, whether you're counting by 2s, 2, 4, 6, or you're just dragging your ruler along. But we need to make a mark every 2 inches. So here, 2, 4. After 4, if I add 2 more, it gets to 6. It gets to 8. Now you're going to notice when I go to mark at 8, there's actually still, my paper ends here. There's actually still a little bit of my paper left over, and that's okay. This little bit longer piece, this piece, is going to measure at 2.5 inches, and that's okay because we will use this piece for our game board. So leave that piece a little bit extra long. All right. So now what we're going to do is this. Now, everywhere I put a mark at 2 inches, I am going to line up my ruler next to it like this. Oops. Let me move it so you can see it on the camera. There we go. I'm going to line up my ruler next to it, and I am going to draw, make sure it's nice and straight. I'm going to draw a straight line all the way down my paper. See, there you have your first line in your first strip. Then I'm going to do that for the rest of my tick marks. So this one here, I'm going to make a line like this, and I'm going to draw all the way down my paper. Next one, I'm going to make a line next to my tick mark for 2 inches, draw it all the way down my paper like that. And then the last one, remember, is going to be a little bit bigger. Remember, we said it was 2.5 inches, and that's okay because this is going to be our game board. So once you have your lines drawn, you are just going to do your best to cut them out. You are going to cut out these 4 strips. Just cut right along the line like this, as straight as you can. You're going to cut them all out. Just like this. It's kind of cool. We get to practice fractions as well as our measuring skills, which I love. We get to combine math skills. And then you are going to take the largest strip. So you remember, I have one strip that's a little bit bigger than all the others. For me, it was this one on the end. I am just going to write on one side of it. I'm just going to put game board so I don't forget that my bigger piece is my game board. I'm just going to write it small on there. Alrighty, so I'm going to put my game board aside, and now what we're going to do with these strips is we're actually going to turn them into halves, fourths, and eighths. So we're actually going to make smaller shapes using these strips. So even though we really partitioned that one big piece of paper into smaller pieces, now we're going to pretend that each of these pieces are holes. So this is one hole, this is another hole, and then this last one down here is also a hole. We're going to partition these into smaller amounts, halves, fourths, and thirds. You're going to notice when we lay out our game pieces like this, they are all the exact same size. So the first thing you need to do is, not using your game board, you can leave that white. What you need to do is you need to color each of these strips with a crayon or colored pencil, one color, each different colors. So for me, I'm going to do this one orange, this one purple, and then this last one is going to be green. It does not matter the colors, but they need to be different colors. I'm going to pause the video. You work on that. When you're done, come back and I'll show you what we do next. Once you have your strips colored, we're going to work on partitioning each strip into a different amount. So we're going to take our first strip. For me, it's my orange one. And this one, we have to partition it into halves. You might already have a guess how to do this. If you know how to do this, go ahead and do it for yourself. I'm going to show you how we can do it. What we can do is to fold it in halves. We want 2 equal parts. So I'm just going to fold it. I'm going to match up the edges with each other like this. Then I'm just going to fold it. And now you will see that I have 2 equal parts. And what I'm going to do is label this one is half and this one is the other half. Remember, it's 1 out of 2 equal parts. Then on the fold line, I'm going to cut it like that. Now I have my halves. Next step is we are going to turn this one into fourths, and this is how we can do this. First, we start by folding it in half. I fold it in half one time. Then, if you remember when we were partitioning with our drawing, we would often, to make fourths, we would divide it in half, and then we would divide the halves into half. So the way we do this by folding is by folding this piece we have in half one more time. Make sure your lines are nice and tight. You can kind of pinch it down like that. Then I'm going to unfold it and I'm going to label them 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. And you should have 4 equal parts. Once you label them, you can cut them at each fold line. Don't cut off any more. Just cut it once at each fold line and you're going to have 4 parts. And if you notice, they're going to line up. They're still the same length as my halves. Now, my very last one, we have to make eighths, and this is a new way to partition for us. So I'm going to take my paper and start by folding it in half. Then I'm going to fold in half again, like I did with fourths. Then I am going to fold it in half one more time, like this. When I open it up, I will have 8 equal sections, so I'm going to label them all 1/8 and then cut them. Now that you have your game pieces all ready, you are ready to play. So watch my next video to learn how to play this game. I'll give you directions on how to play.